Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dig In with Dad. And today we're going to be doing something pretty special. Now, normally we have a tradition that on Christmas morning we make cinnamon buns, right? And we're going to be expanding that tradition because we have a bit of a special occasion you'll see here behind me that's coming up. And we've got a guest of honor here that has requested that we almost do like a Christmas in July. So here's our guest of honor. And there she goes. So, like I said, she has requested fresh homemade cinnamon buns for her birthday. So let's get to it, okay? This one has got a couple steps to it, but it is pretty easy, and like most of the things that we've gone through here in the videos, everything is better when you make it from scratch and it's fresh out of the oven, right? Homemade fresh cinnamon buns, warm still out of the oven? Come on. Anyway, let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we need to proof our yeast, right? We need to get everything activated and get it all going. So to do that, I learned from our last video, and I'm not going to try and jam it all into a small bowl. We need a cup of milk, some yeast, yes, I buy a lot, and a little bit of sugar. Sugar is really just going to serve as some food to get the yeast going, okay? Now, you're going to see a lot of similarities from this and let's say a bread recipe that we've done in the past. But we're going to be substituting out all of our water for milk, right? Makes it a lot, just a richer flavor, right? So anyway, let's get started. So a cup of milk, and we're going to add a packet of yeast, and a packet, in case you buy in bulk, is equal to 2¼ teaspoons. So let's go ahead and add that, and then we'll add just a quick scoop of sugar. We don't need a lot though. All right, so we're just going to stir this together, and I've already realized that as I'm stirring it together, I already screwed it up and didn't put it into the bigger jug, so that's a win. I guess we don't need this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to let our milk sit with our yeast in it for about 10 minutes or so, and it should start to froth up. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so we're back, and while we wait for the yeast mixture to keep foaming up, we're going to add a few ingredients to our stand mixer here. And again, if you don't have a stand mixer, a little elbow grease in a big bowl works just fine. So to start, we're going to go from the magical giant mega bag of flour, and we're going to add 4 cups of flour. Half a cup of sugar. I don't know if you can hear that. That is my next door neighbor cutting the lawn. It's a battle that never ends between us. Who cuts their lawn first? Whose lawn looks the best? I love it. Next, we're going to add 1/3 cup of butter. And this is what 1/3 cup looks like when it's not cut neatly from the brick. I like to weigh my butter just because sometimes I can get a little bit wobbly. A little pinch of salt. 2 eggs. All right, we're just going to use the dough hook attachment and just get that stuff all mixed together, and then we're going to add our yeast mixture into the stand mixer once everything's combined. All right, take our yeast mixture, dump her in. And it is not the end of the world if it's not super frothy, kind of overflowing, like what we normally want to see for bread, because we're going to let this sit and rise for a good long time, so it's going to have lots of time to really puff up for you. And you're going to want to keep mixing this. It's eventually going to come together into a dough, and ideally, if you're using the mixer right so it pulls away clean from the bowl, and if you're just using elbow grease, then you don't want it to be some big globby sticky mess. So, okay, so we're all mixed together. Right, we're gonna add something like this. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna transfer to a lightly oiled bowl. I'm just using vegetable oil. Use whatever kind of oil you want. Just a little splash, again, just so it doesn't really stick to the bowl. Okay? And I just kind of use my hands and just coat up the sides, all the way around. So take our dough, just a very rough ball, right, into the bowl, and then I just kind of flip it around just so that all sides are coated with the oil. That's it. We'll cover that with some saran wrap, put it somewhere warm. I usually put mine on top of the fridge for about an hour. We'll come back then. Okay, we are back. We've let our dough rest for about an hour or so, right, until it ideally doubles in size. But again, if it doesn't quite double in size, it's not the end of the world. We're gonna let this rest again later on, so they'll be fine. Our next step here is let's make the filling for these actual cinnamon buns. So to do that, I promise that this bowl will be big enough. I know that's a bit of a problem for me. We're gonna start with some brown sugar. Now I like to use the brown sugar for the filling. You can use regular white sugar if you like, but the brown sugar just has a little bit more depth to it almost, right? Probably just the molasses that gets added. Next up, we'll add some cinnamon. And we're gonna try to measure out the cinnamon, although I'm not confident. Yeah, close enough. And we'll make a little bit more of a mess as we put it all back together again. All right, perfect. So mix these together, just our brown sugar and our cinnamon. It is really nothing crazy, right? But you wanna try and get out, if you've got like clumps of your brown sugar in there, try and just kind of smash those with the back of the spoon. We want this to be as nice and smooth as possible, right? No big chunks, no big rock formations of sugar, if we can help it anyway. Wonderful. All right, next we're going to want to make sure our counter is dry, because we're going to take our dough out of our bowl, and what we're going to be doing here is rolling pin, take our dough out, a little bit of flour, and we're just going to roll it out, right? We're looking for something that is reasonably long, I'd say about 16 inches or so, and about 12 inches kind of deep with you here. So a big long rectangle is what we're going for. So I'm just going to start by just folding the dough over onto itself a couple times. Right? Remember we had that oil in the bowl, so we just want to kind of get that incorporated into our dough again, and just make sure that it's nice and smooth and elastic, right? And you can see that it really just kind of flops around for us here, so this is perfect. You'll also want to make sure to flour your rolling pin, because the dough is sticky everywhere, not just on the counter side. All right, now remember, patience is a virtue here. We're going to go back and forth a few times. We're going to flip the dough over. It's okay. You'll see here it's going to take me a few runs as well. Okay, so I think we're pretty much there. And once you kind of do this maybe once or twice, you'll kind of get the hang of the measuring, I guess. And I use my hands, right? I kind of know that, you know, your hand is roughly X number of inches, so it's, you know, 2 or 3 handfuls or whatever it might be. Kind of saves you just from getting out a tape measure in the kitchen. So once we've got it all rolled out, try not to have some big, thick, chunky ends, right? We want it to be relatively uniform. But again, not the end of the world. So roll this out as nice and evenly as possible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take some more butter. All right, and earlier I showed you what 1/3 cup of butter looks like. Well, this is what it looks like again. Now what we're going to do is we want to make sure this is nice and soft. Because we're doing this in the summertime, I find that our butter dish actually keeps that butter perfect, right? It's not really hard to kind of scrape. If you're doing this in the wintertime, again, make sure this is soft, because when we're going to spread this butter all over, we don't want to rip our dough. So all we're going to do is we're going to take this butter right onto our dough, and I'm just going to use the back of the spoon and cover the entire thing in butter. know, it just sounds horrible for you, doesn't it? Again, nice and slow. Don't rip the dough. Don't rush. No problem. All right, I think we're about set. That is a third cup of butter spread pretty evenly, right? And you should get a nice good coating. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that mixture that we made before with our brown sugar and our cinnamon, cover the whole thing, right? Take this whole bowl, all of it. It's going to be thick, and you're going to kind of want to do this, you know, kind of pat it down here, because otherwise, in our next step, it's going to go everywhere. So this is where you'll notice again, right? And you'll see me kind of digging in the bowl here a bit. If you've got these little clumps of sugar, right? When you kind of get it spread out, maybe it's just OCD or I don't like the look of it, but I want it to be all granular. So, but it's difficult to kind of smash those little lumps when it's on your dough. So let's just do that. Kind of spread it around roughly here, and then we'll get our hands dirty. Nice and gentle, and of course you want to try and get all the way to the edges. You know, maximum flavor coverage is what we're going for here. No pressing down just yet, right? Kind of get it roughly to where we want it to be. And then once we're happy with our coverage, then we kind of add a little pressure. All right, very good. A little light press. Okay. Next step is we're going to take this big flat roll that we've got here and we're going to roll it just like a big cinnamon toast log almost. Now I'm going to use a bench scraper to help me just in case it's sticking to the counter at all. You don't have to, right? If you don't have one, just be gentle, right? So we're going to start really slow, and I usually start with the far edge because I like to see it rolling towards me, but I'm going to roll towards you guys just so you kind of get a better idea. So nice and slow and lots of prep work to get it started here. Once you get it going, it's a lot easier, but that start is sometimes what is difficult. So you'll see when we start to flip this lip up, the beginning one, all your toppings and your sugar is going to start to roll forward. It's okay. Just trust the process. So we're going to try and keep it tight and roll and press down as much as you can, right? You want a nice tight cinnamon roll here. We don't want for it to all kind of fall apart because it was rolled loosely. It's going to be very tempting once it gets going and it gets easier to roll. You're going to want to go faster because it will roll easier. Don't. Because that's when you lose the tightness of your cinnamon roll. All right, and then once we get to the end, you want to roll it just enough so that that end piece rolls over and the seam is on the bottom, okay? All right, and then I'm just making sure that it's kind of uniform, right? So we're squeezing a little bit. We don't want, you know, a cinnamon roll log, as appetizing as that sounds, to be all kind of lumpy. So we're making sure it's nice and uniform. And see, the counter is relatively clean, right? We only had a little bit spill out here because we were nice and uniform with our spreading out of the filling, okay? Not too close to the edge. I think I gave it maybe about 1/4 of an inch kind of thing. So I'll just kind of tap these ends in to make them a little bit more uniform. Okay, next we're going to take a 9x13 baking dish, okay? And I'm just going to cover this with cooking spray You can use butter if you want to, right? We've only used 2/3 of a cup in the recipe so far. So if butter is your game, you do it. Make sure to get the sides and the bottom. All right, and then what we're gonna do is we're going to take, I'm gonna use again the bench scraper here. You can just use a plain knife as well, right? And we're gonna cut this into ideally 12 equal pieces, okay? I'm gonna start just by cutting mine in half. That'll make it easier for my poor little brain to do the math on how to cut these into 6 equal pieces. Okay, I made it through 12 pieces. Then take your cinnamon roll pieces, right? And then you stack them on your tray, or in your baking dish rather, sorry. Right, so again, bench scraper just kind of helps me pull it up from the countertop. And you just want to lay them just like this. Okay, you're going to turn them on their side. Okay, and sometimes if it's starting to unroll when you flip it over, take that seam edge and pinch it against, the side of the pan or something like that to hold it together. Worst case scenario, then give it a little squeeze, right, and push it back together. All right, so there we go. Right, it's okay if they're kind of oddly shaped or whatever. Right, every cinnamon bun is not uniform. Now what we're going to do is we're doing this ahead of time, right? So the goal is that we want to have these fresh tomorrow morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover these with saran wrap and we're going to put them in the fridge and they're just going to rise throughout the rest of the day and overnight, okay? And that way in the morning, what we're going to take them out, pop them right in the oven and make our icing, piece of cake, right? If you want to eat these kind of right away, cover these with saran wrap and let them sit again for at least another hour or two in a warm spot. Okay, don't put them in the fridge. When we're doing a cold rise like this, it's going to take a lot longer, hence the overnight. But if you're doing it on top of the fridge or somewhere warm, just another hour or two, these are going to puff and fill out in the rest of the pan, and then even more so as they bake. So we're going to cover these into the fridge overnight, and we'll see you tomorrow, okay? All right, everyone, welcome back. Next morning, we're going to be making these and finishing up our cinnamon buns before everyone wakes up. So nice thing to start the day. We've taken the saran wrap off of our cinnamon buns here, and they've risen up a little bit, but what we're gonna do is we're just preheating the oven now. While that happens, we're gonna make our icing. So we're gonna preheat the oven to 350. And to start our icing, we need, you guessed it, more butter. Okay? We're gonna start with, it's a little over 1/3 of a cup of butter, so that will bring our grand total to about a cup of butter. That seems a little bit more in line. Powdered sugar, cream cheese, what's this? Vanilla extract, and of course a little bit of salt. So essentially all these things just go right inside your mixer, or again, a regular bowl and a whisk and a little bit of elbow grease, and we're just gonna blend this all together, okay? Let's get to it. All right, and one thing that you're gonna wanna keep in mind is all of our ingredients that we put in here, mainly the butter and the cream cheese, make sure they're at room temperature, right? So that it mixes together really easy. You don't want the hard, kind of half frozen stuff. You're just gonna be banging around butter in your bowl. So room temperature, nice and soft. And another quick note here, as it's kind of starting to mix, you may need to take a couple breaks, right? Clean out the whisk. Oven's ready. Clean out the whisk. And also, you're gonna wanna up the speed, right? I'm just starting a little bit slow because I don't want powdered sugar everywhere, but it's gonna take some time. Eventually it will come together and it'll look just like icing. So, patience again. Let's check it out. Now wait. Okay, these have just come out of the oven let them rest for about 5 minutes or so. And now we just put the icing on. We're in the home stretch. I usually just kind of dump a couple globs, right, all over the place. And be careful when you're spreading it, because you're gonna wanna hurry up here. You don't wanna rip them, right? So I'll put a couple globs and almost let it melt a little bit so the icing gets even softer. I don't think I have to tell anybody that you're gonna use all the icing. And I'm just gonna finish up with a rubber spatula, spread it over the top, and scrape every last bit out.
Oh my.
All right, so there we have it. Our icing is on fresh. These look delicious. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.
Oh my god!